I want to talk a little bit about MSTR in this video, and I want to talk about my share price targets for MSTR, which, if you're an average, reasonably minded investor, you should be thinking about, okay, what are my price targets in dollar terms for these other investments that I'm making outside of Bitcoin? In the last video I did, we spoke about why my perspective on MSTR, the things that you have to think about when getting into the trade. And now I want to talk about the actual thinking that has caused me to move another 15% of my ETF positions into MSTR for a long-term hold. Now, as you guys know, I've been the biggest MSTR bull because I was the first person, not the first person obviously, but one of the first people in the people that are talking about Bitcoin to buy MSTR, right? Because I bought it the day after they announced that they were going towards a Bitcoin treasury, and I've always had a position since then. I've scaled it backwards and forwards, or higher and lower, based on what I thought MSTR's position was going to be. And of course, you guys know that I made I evaluated MSTR's value proposition slightly wrong in January, and the reason what I said was MSTR is going to lose a little bit of its value prop with the ETFs coming out. That was a pretty rational way of looking at it, but where I got it completely wrong was that MSTR is transforming into a speculative platform on top of an asset that is extremely valuable to institutional markets that can't get direct exposure into Bitcoin. Plus, if you've got an underlying asset that's growing, then a speculative platform on top of that is going to have growing value. In addition to that, they're actually buying and owning the underlying asset, which is driving the value of the company higher. So I want to talk about a little bit about my valuation predictions, and if you're interested in this, then subscribe to the channel, because we'll be having more of these types of rational conversations about what's going on with MSTR and Bitcoin and everything else. And I'm trying to get people to think about things in a more rational way. So this is the thinking that I did, and there's a couple of different caveats and things like that, but I want to try and simplify this thinking down as much as possible if you're thinking about making an allocation to MSTR, seeing the price run and wondering, do you make an allocation now or wait? There's certainly part of me that, I have a certain portion of my MSTR position where I'll be trading in and out based on, what's going on with the multiples to the leverage, the multiple on the asset value that they have. But I wanted to form a more sizable long-term 10-year hold position, which is why I decided to execute that right now. So the way I'm looking at MSTR at this moment in time is this. There's a couple different metrics here that I want to look at and to form the foundation of this analysis. Number one, I am assuming that they don't buy a single other Bitcoin, right? I'm assuming that they do not buy one more single Bitcoin. And of course, we know that that's not true because they've just announced they're going to buy $42 billion worth of Bitcoin, right? So I'm assuming that not a single other Bitcoin is bought, right? I'm assuming that I believe that a speculative platform for an institutional market built on top of an asset like Bitcoin is going to generate an interest level that's worth 5 times more than the underlying asset value. The very fact that you can place leverage bets, leverage positions, etc., hedge in a leveraged way, I think that drives a 5x long-term valuation on the platform that is being built on top of Bitcoin, which is obviously MicroStrategy. And I think MicroStrategy is that platform product. So I'm assuming here that the business itself, the tech business itself, has zero value, right? So when we look at these numbers are going to sound crazy, but it's actually pretty conservative, and I wanted to put that out there first in the way I'm looking at it. So, and also, there's going to be people that say, okay, what about the premium to NAV, et cetera, et cetera. Sure, if you're trading short term and you're looking for entry points, then yes, that's true. But if you're looking at building a long-term position, the entry positions don't matter, because even if, for example, MSTR right now, right, if you look at the premium to the NAV, there's a 3x premium. So you're basically buying Bitcoin for $190,000-ish versus the $70,000 that you can buy in the market for. That's true. But if you think Bitcoin's going to $1 million, it's still undervalued, right? So the way I've thought about it is this, right? If we look at, and I've got a ranges here, I've got like my number, I've got Saylor's number, and I've got, the psychological number that everyone's thinking about. And Saylor's number here, based on my analysis, is way more bullish on MSTR than the number I'm going to give you, right? So we'll start with my number. And my number, as I've always said, I think Bitcoin is going to $5 million per coin. And I'm not even putting a timeline on when this happens, but I think it's going to $5 million a coin. And based on that, if they didn't buy a single other Bitcoin, didn't accrete any more Bitcoin to the underlying shares, the total asset value at $5 million per Bitcoin for MSTR would be $1.26 trillion. The asset value per share outstanding, again, no more dilution, no more nothing, just freeze frame right now, would be around $7,054 per share. And if you add the 5x multiple based on the speculative value of the platform, it takes my MSTR price prediction to $35,272 per share. And this is a completely, in my mind, rational and conservative price prediction based on the fact that they're going to continue to acquire Bitcoin as Bitcoin price climbs. That would give a total company valuation of $6.3 trillion, and that's also not out of the ordinary, with Nvidia being worth $3 trillion, more than the entire UK stock market. So it doesn't sound crazy. Now what I'm going to do is look at $1 million a coin, right? That's the psychological value, right? By the way, $5 million a coin is a $100 trillion market cap, right? Real estate is a $330 trillion market cap. So if Bitcoin is worth $100 trillion, it's easily conceivable that MicroStrategy with 252,000 Bitcoin at peak times could be worth, $6 trillion. That means that there's nothing out of the ordinary here. So, and by the way, people will say, okay, but 5x multiple, what rationalizes that? Well, I'm talking about in acute time windows here, right? I think that you could see a $35,000 Bitcoin price in a acute window at a 5x multiple. If the multiple through a quote-unquote bear market is sitting at a 3, it will be less than this. But I think based on the last bull market, it went up to a 6, and then because of the financing options, they couldn't maintain converting that into Bitcoin, so it came back down again. But I think a long-term average multiple of 5, based on the platform that's being created, is quite reasonable. And if we look at $1 million price target, right, it would mean that the total asset value would be $252 billion. You got to remember, again, they're not adding a single other Bitcoin in any of these examples that I'm doing, right? At $1 million Bitcoin, $252 billion of assets, asset value per share would be $1,400. That means at a 5x multiple, you're looking at $7,000 per MSTR share. This is assuming no dilutions. This is assuming no stock splits, nothing like that. And it would value the company at $1.26 trillion. That makes complete sense when you've got a $21 trillion market cap on an asset, right? So none of this is really out of the ordinary here. Nvidia is worth, $3 trillion. MicroStrategy has grown their business value from $1.6 billion the day that I first bought a position to $50 billion at this point. So none of this is out of the ordinary here. And if you're a rational investor, you should be thinking about this. So what type of leverage does this give you on Bitcoin, right? The way you need to think about it is this, let's say you think Bitcoin's going to $1 million, right? You divide it by 71,000, 73,000, whatever the price is right now. And you say, okay, so that's going to go up around 14x, something like that. And at that valuation, what is your valuation on what MSTR would be? Well, mine is $7,000. So if we go 7,000 divided by $244, which is what the price was before I started recording this video, you're looking at a 29x increase. So if you think about it, MSTR is going to double what Bitcoin has done. And that is, with this example, with no more Bitcoin being bought, no more value being added to MicroStrategy in terms of the multiple to asset value, and Bitcoin continuing to grow, right? Very, very simple price model here. And so you're looking at basically, at $1 million price point on Bitcoin, you're looking at 14x increase here from Bitcoin and a 29x increase from MicroStrategy. So then you look at that and go, well, what percentage of my overall portfolio is worth that? I'm never going to sell any amount of cold storage Bitcoin that I have to get into anything. That's there, that's tacked away, that's doing really well. But I think moving, an extra 15% of my ETF positions to MicroStrategy makes a lot of sense at this point for me, right? For me, I'm not saying what you should do, but for me, moving an extra 15%, and I think I will have somewhere in the region of overall, by the time I'm finished, a 25% in my just the ETF positions, 25% in MicroStrategy, 75% in the ETFs. I think that's what I'm building towards here, and I'll continue to add to this as we go forward. And again, I'm not looking at short-term speculations here. I'm not looking at short-term buying opportunities here. This is a long-term position. So I'm holding for 10 years. Short-term fluctuations don't matter. The most I'll do with this is buy puts when the market is overheated, and go watch my other video on that if to understand what I just said there. Now let's look at something extra bullish. That's Michael Saylor's valuation. Obviously, he did a beautiful presentation at Bitcoin Prague, and he said that he thinks Bitcoin is going to be a $13 million asset by, I think, 2045. I think that's the year he put on there. Well, if that's the case, then MSTR would have a asset value per share of $18,341. Oh, hold on. Well, give me 1 second. Let me just, right, we're going to go with there. I was reading from the wrong notes. At $13 million Bitcoin and a 5x multiple, the total asset value that MSTR will have, assuming they don't buy a single other Bitcoin, is going to be $3.276 trillion, which is the current value of NVIDIA, right? And the asset value per share will be $18,341, which means at a 5x multiple, you're looking at an MSTR share price of $91,700, which would make the overall market cap of MicroStrategy roughly $16.38 trillion. Sounds inconceivable at this moment in time, but just think about the type of world we would be living in if Bitcoin was $13 million, and how the credit expansion would have happened, and how much Apple would be worth, and how much Nvidia would be worth, and how much all these companies will be worth, how much would ChatGPT be worth if we're living in that world. And then these numbers don't sound too crazy. Now remember, there's going to be stock splits, there's going to be all this other things that are going on, and of course the number at that point won't be that. But I'm talking at today's market value, my price target and my re-evaluation point on MSTR will be once we hit $35,000 a share at today's structure. There will be splits, etc., and I'll keep an eye on that, obviously. But I'm moving, I have moved this week 15% more of my ETF positions into MSTR, and I've probably got another 5%-ish to do based on previous holdings. I need to calculate that. So that's my price target on MSTR. I will reevaluate my MSTR position. I'll buy and hold it and reevaluate it at $35,000 per share, and I'm giving that around 10 years. I think that is my price target here. If you've got any questions on that valuation process or anything, leave it in the comments. Of course, reach out to me on Twitter, but I think MSTR is going to be worth a minimum of $35,272 per share within the next 10 years, assuming they don't buy a single other Bitcoin, which of course we know that they will continue to do. Let me know what you think about that. Let me know if this video has helped you think about what type of allocation you want to MSTR. And again, I will say this is for my analysis, and I want to share it with you to give you a different way to think about it. But ultimately, there are always only 3 rules to Bitcoin. Step number 1, you buy Bitcoin. Step number 2, shut the fuck up. And step number 3, you get fabulously wealthy.